Here we go then, folks. What have I got to do? This needs rubbing down. It's a nice cold crisp day, but it's dry, so I'm going to take it outside and give it a rub down and sand. All the surfaces will be given one coat of Mod Podge, which will allow it to dry, and then that'll be ready for covering. Obviously the cabanes will be taken off and the undercarriage can be taken off, and perhaps even the cowl at the front, which will make life easier. But I also need to consider, I'll turn it over here, where the radio gear is going to go. Because I want the pull system to be obvious on this model, it's such an iconic part of the design, I want to include it. I need to install the servos, and the interior of this is quite cavernous, so installing them isn't a problem. Positioning them in terms of weight, well, what I'm going to do is rig the whole model up and roughly see where the CG is as it is with the engine in place, and I'll decide whether I'm going to move the servos towards the front or towards the rear. It makes sense to take advantage of the weight that's going into the model. It needs to go in the model, the servos, and then any other fine adjustment of the CG can be achieved with the battery pack. So the next thing I'm going to do is mock it all up, put everything together, and then I'll come back to you and tell you whether it's going to be nose heavy or tail heavy. Almost always it's tail heavy, which would mean that I need to move the servos as far forward as I possibly can. Back in a mo. Okay, back from the balancing act. I've checked out, I've fitted everything together, sort of balanced the tail surface in the appropriate place. And yes, it is tail heavy, but not excessively so. So what I'm going to aim to do is, when it comes to locating the servos for the rudder and the elevator, I'm going to try and push them as far forward as I can, and that's going to save the amount of lead that I need to put in the front. The next job is to give the entire frame a coat of Mod Podge. Those of you who've seen me using this technique before, dress lining as a covering, will know that I put great store in this stuff. Somebody at the field on Sunday actually asked me, can you use PVA? And the simple answer is yes, but I don't find it anywhere near as effective as Mod Podge. I don't know what is extra in here. It feels like a thickened up PVA glue. Somebody actually suggested it's got starch in it, but I don't know about that. But generally, PVA will work, but nowhere near as well as this does. So this works, and I'll keep using it. This happens to be gloss. It's used in a lot of crafting situations. It doesn't matter, you can get it in matte, but for our purposes, it doesn't make any difference. The whole thing's going to get one coat of Mod Podge. I'll do that now, and then we'll actually clear the decks, get rid of some of the junk that's accumulated after a few days modelling, and we'll start the process of covering this fuselage. You'll notice that I've taken off the undercarriage and the cabane structure, so it's going to be a fairly straightforward job, I hope, in covering this, and it's a good platform to demonstrate the technique, and I'll go through it as we work through. Let's get some Mod Podge on. I just thought it worth mentioning this. On the all sheeted areas, the whole surface is being coated in Mod Podge, but when it comes to the open structure, we only need it along the edges. So that's what I'm going to do. You don't need it anywhere here, just on the edges where you want the fabric to stick. We're not going to stick it to the crossed members, so there's no need to coat them. I'll crack on with this, push on with it, and then when it's all dry, a cup of coffee later probably, we'll come back and I'll start showing you how I'm going to cut the panels out to be less wasteful for the actual application of the dress lining itself. A few people have asked me where I get it from. It's only probably of any relevance to people in the UK. I get it from a general store called Boys, who have a haberdashery section. Although the lady told me that the spec for the fabric was on the receipt, that wasn't the case. If you're buying it online, I would go by weight. I've got it around about 70 grams per square metre. If you want to track something down that's compatible, I would look in that sort of range. I think 70 grams per square metre is quite acceptable. If you've got a much smaller structure, a smaller plane, then silk's the way to go. You can at least half that weight. But filling the pores in silk can be problematic. So a pal showed me a technique using tissue, where you would coat the model in tissue first and then apply the silk over the surface. Now, it's a technique I may return to and do slightly differently to the way I've done it in the past. But there is a video, I'll put it in the link actually, in the description below. There is a video of me experimenting with silk. It's more involved than this. It's fiddlier, but it does produce a very light finish. And that may be a factor depending on the model that you're building. Personally, I think this is quite suitable for most radio-controlled aircraft that you might work with. I'm even considering using it on a project that's a lot lighter than this in terms of structure. But I think it'll still do the job, but more of that in another video. So I'll carry on with this, just applying the Mod Podge where I want the fabric to stick, and then just leave it to dry. Well then folks, for you the last transition was but 1.5 seconds. For me it's been a day's work, and that's because before I started covering this I realised that I really needed to install the radio gear, and I'll explain why in a second. That's what I've done. This plate here still needs to have locating screws to lock it in place. That servo will control the rudder. This pair of servos, which are linked via the transmitter, will control the two elevators, and they'll be mixed together to allow them to be set up. There's a servo in the bottom which is going to obviously operate the throttle. Now, I did a little balancing act, as I mentioned, and found that things were actually far better than I thought they would be. But even so, I've moved these servos forward of the CG, and this is basically in line with the CG, I think. Batteries to the front, and that will mean, I think, a minimum amount of weight added up front, which is obviously what we're aiming for. Now, the reason that I did that, because I'm using cables, pull system, they exit at the rear, and I wanted them to be as near to the scale location as possible. And that being the case, I've produced a little template, which I'll keep safely. I'm about to lose it. I'll put it to one side. They are the burn holes, which I'll burn through with a soldering iron through the covering to allow the cables to exit. And then I'll put a reinforcing piece over the top as per the prototype. That's put to one side. And now that I've got that done, I'll take out any of the loose bits that are bouncing around, and we'll start covering. Starting with the bottom. Bottom covering first, then the sides, and then the turtle deck. So let's get set up, and we'll start the covering process using dress lining. It's already been Mod Podged. That's well dry now. It's double purpose, obviously the adhesive for the covering, but it also, I feel, strengthens up all the joints because it soaks into them, and it is essentially a glue. So let's get cracking and get some covering done. Ready to start now. Let's get going. This is a nice straightforward piece. I've cut a square of the dress lining, crimped edges, just because it keeps it nice and neat. And it's going to be overlapped. I'm going to start in the centre and work out on the solid pieces. And there you go, that's taken. Now I've got the iron, people have asked me repeatedly about this. That's the iron I use. It's not a clever digital one, bought it in a swap meet for £5. So not expensive, not high tech, it's not required. You know, these high tech bits of kit are great if you're looking for something to spend money on and you haven't got anything else to spend it on, or it's not an issue for you. But in my case, I just want to do it on the cheap if I can, because I can then spend that money on something else. So that's glued on, and I need to make a little nick here. For the overlap. Now there's a slight curve in that part of the fuselage, but we don't need to worry about it because in this state it's very, very flexible and it's easy to bend it round. Actually quite complex shapes. I'm actually going to use a blade for that one. Wait a moment. Probably need to put a new one in here, but just for the purpose of this, this'll do. When I covered the Junkmeister, I was actually able to cover the whole fuselage. And if you're familiar with the Junkmeister, it's or unfamiliar with it rather, it's a very rounded front end, and I was able to cover the whole fuselage in one go using this material. So it's very effective. I'm just using a couple of tins to hold it upright to stop it moving around. Cut the little notch out here as well. There we go. I had a young lad pop round to the house yesterday who he was buying a couple of my foam models that I no longer want, trying to encourage him to keep on what he's flying. He's really doing remarkably well, really well in fact. He's already done his B certificate as promoted through the BMFA. I must admit I haven't done any certificates, that's just me. If I have to, I will. If I don't have to, I won't. I've spent a lifetime doing things to please people in the job I did. No more. So that's just me. But it does encourage you to develop new skills. I just don't particularly think it makes anybody safer, because I've seen people who've got certificates, A certificates, and they've never flown for 8 months, and then they come and take a model up in the air and all hell breaks loose. So where's the safety in that? Never mind, that's just my little bugbear. But yeah, young lad, and he's really keen. He's got a channel. His name's Daniel. I'll try to get his link and I'll put it in the description. I encourage you to go along, subscribe. He's a young lad and there's not enough young people in this hobby. And I think we should do everything we can to encourage them. Anyway, I digress. That's that bit covered. All done. This piece, I'm going to cut a piece out. Now, if it's a complex shape, it's possible to use some paper to produce a template so you're not wasting material, but this is fairly straightforward. When it comes to the side, I'll show you how I'm going to approach that, but I'll cut out a panel for here. It's going to be a little bit awkward on the rear because I have to get it round this skid, but we'll come to that when we need to. I'll cut out the panel and we'll get this covered now. Actually, on second thoughts, I thought I might as well show you what I do here. This is some old wallpaper that I've got, and I've cut this out. I want to make it a little template. You can see all I'm doing is rubbing along the edge, and I'll transfer this to the covering so that I can get an accurate piece cut out without excessive waste. It's particularly useful when you're using solar film or foil, as the Petrinsky brothers call it. So there you can see I've made an impression on this. I'll trim it to size, and then all I'll do is I'll cut 1/4 of an inch excess all the way around to allow for the overlap that I'm looking for, and it's much easier doing it this way than trying to cut it once it's glued onto the model I find. So just a simple technique. We've all, I'm sure, got spare wallpaper lying around. If you haven't, you can buy lining paper for very cheap price, and it's really handy for doing stuff like this, sketching stuff out, roughing ideas out. I use it all the time. So I'm going to use this as a template now to cut out the dress lining that I need, and then we'll get that ironed on. Okay, shape cut out, let's get cracking. I'll tack this end first. I'm sure that regular subscribers have seen me do this before, but the name of the game with this material is to get it as crease free as possible before you shrink the whole thing. So I'm pulling it taut there. Doesn't have to be excessive, but we're trying to get it as all the wrinkles out before you actually go to shrink it at all. You'll not get them out if you leave it in too much of a wrinkled state, is the point I'm trying to make, clumsily, because I'm concentrating on this. Now I'm going around the metal bracket here, and I will cut that out later on. So I'm happy with that now. I can pull it out, start in the middle on the sheeted areas and work outwards. There you go, that's got a firm grip. Then tack here. It is really a nice material to work with, and because it's not covered in glue all over the underside, it's much easier to manipulate and move around than Oratex or solar film would be, simply because you have no glue on it other than what's on the frame. So in this state, I think it's actually easier to work. And this covering technique in terms of bottom panel, side panel, top panel would be the same as I would adopt for any covering material, whether it was tissue or solar film or foil, as I've already referred to it. And then I'll wrap this, and then all the way around the edge, what I'm going to do is seal it with dope, and that further bonds it to the surface. So I'll fold it over, carry on, and then we'll do the side panels. Time to get the side panels on. It starts to get exciting now because it takes on the form of a completed fuselage, in my view anyway, once you start doing that. So I'm going to actually just attach it in the centre. I'm going to lead out from this area so I can pull this taut at this end, take as many of the creases out as possible. Now it gets a little bit repetitive me saying this, but that's the way you do it. Then out from the centre, and this area is going to be covered with a plastic overlay to simulate the metalwork on the front of the fuselage. It's a caricature of a D7 is the way I would describe this model. I had contemplated reworking this whole area, but then if I was going to do that, I might as well go the route of doing a fully scale model, and I don't really want to do that. I'm quite happy to work in what I would describe as the standoff scale category with a little bit of flourish, and that works for me. You all find the area that you feel the most comfortable in, don't we? Now that I've glued that down, I think I can pull this off and get a little bit more tension in there. Glue one side. That allows me to pull it across. Well, what colour scheme am I going for with this? I had thought about producing the finish sort of camouflage scheme, which is geometric shapes and colours. I've already got a model like that I bought second hand, basically for, I'll be honest with you, for the C2 engine that was in the model, because it was a bit of a state. It was what you call a fixer-upper, and I fixed it up, and to my surprise it flies absolutely beautifully. So when this model appeared at a swap meet and the chap was just trying to clear his workshop, I think, because I got it at a really good price, I couldn't turn down the opportunity of snapping it up, and it sat for over a year. I'm not out of the usual with that. I think lots of people do that sort of thing, but it sat for a year unstarted until I decided to have a go at it. And as is the case with all flare models so far that I've experienced, it's a lovely model. So do I go that route? But I'm leaning towards keeping that model as it is, fly it until it gets beyond tatty. It's at the tatty stage now, and then I'll strip it and recover it using this technique. But in the meantime, do I really want to finish Fokker D7s? Well, not really. And I don't want to go down the lozenge pattern route, as interesting as that might be. I've got other things on my plate, and I just don't think I can have I'll have the time to commit to that. So I thought, why not go for a Dutch one? Fokker was, after all, Dutch, and after the Great War, many of the D7s found their way into the Dutch Air Force. So I think this is going to be a Dutch model, which is fairly plain, but it has rather nice insignia markings on it. So what I'm going to do now is trim this, trim it down a little more, and then wrap it, and then I'll seal all this with dope, and then we'll do the other side, which you don't need to see, obviously, and then once the other side's completed, we'll finish off by doing the upper deck, which is basically this decking area here and the turtle deck at the back. So I'll trim this up and pop back when the other side's done. And so to the final panel, I'm going to iron this on, and I'm not going to overlap it actually, I'm going to dope it once it's been ironed on, and I'm going to cut this off flush because there is an overlap here, and I think that'll be sufficient to hold everything in place and also produce a very neat finish. No matter how hard you try, it's very difficult to get a neat edge along here without it looking clumsy. So starting from the middle, because I'm working with sheeting, we're going to iron the centre down and then work out. So down here, and then from there it's simply a case of ironing out. You'll notice that the cutouts I'm leaving, I'm going over the whole lot in one go. I'll dope it as it is, and then when everything's been doped, at least one coat, I'll use a brand new blade and I'll actually cut those out after the dope has done its work and shrunk and set. If you're careful with this, you'll get all the wrinkles out as you go along. That's what I'm aiming to do. I recently watched one of Cliff Harvey's really good videos, and I made a comment that the thing I found interesting was as he was building his little EDF jet, it's listening to the thought process, and that's what I enjoy about watching his videos, but lots of other videos out there, lots of other creators, how they approach things. It's called research if you copy off lots of people rather than plagiarism. So this is going nicely, and there's a bit of a compound curve here, but because of the nature of this dress lining, I'm confident that it will manage it no problem at all without any major creases, which it's doing. So I'll carry on doing this, and when it's all done, I'll dope it, and then we'll look at it being finely trimmed up and prepared. Some thin down dope here. About 50-50. The wife's going to love me when she comes in the dining area. The kitchen's smelling of dope. I'll open all the windows, and that'll hide the crime. I'm crackers, must be. She's crazy for putting up with me, that's for certain, bless her. My daughter once did some cupcakes for her friends, and she'd left them out on the board to cool and then put them in a Tupperware to take to school. When she came home, she complained and said, "Dad, everything tasted of fiberglass resin." Guess what I'd been doing? My daughter's far more fearsome than my wife is, so, and neither of them will doubt that. They both agree with that. So I didn't do that again. This gives you a view of how it goes on. And any little bumps that appear, you can use the iron to flatten them out through the dope. The dope responds really well to the heat as well. In fact, instead of Mod Podge, I have experimented using just dope. And it does work, full strength dope that is. It does work, but I think Mod Podge is far superior, so I stick with the Mod Podge. You can see I'm going over the exposed edges here because when it's set it goes nice and hard, and that allows me to give a nice crisp cut, which is what I'm after along those openings. They'll need to be finished off with simulated leather and such like. It's always exciting doing this part of the model, I think. It's like applying that final roll of wallpaper and decorating, isn't it? This is shrinking dope that I'm using actually. You wouldn't have to, it's just I've got lots of it available, and it can only help in making it taut, can't it? Oh, I smell it's getting. Can you smell that through the camera? Right, flick this round and do the other side. I think I've decided that I'm going to use this dress lining to cover Tony Ray's Tiger Moth. I'm fairly confident that it's no different to conventional covering in weight, even allowing for processing it like this. And because I think I'm going to go with an RAF camouflage colour. No matter what I purchased, I would have to paint it anyway. So why not do the whole thing in this? Tony Ray thinks that I might have to beef the structure up to handle the dope. I don't think so. I think he's underestimating the design that he's done himself. So I think that's where I'm going to go with this. I've got plenty of the covering left as well. I've got lots of it left, in fact. So I'm going to use it to cover the Tiger Moth. But I don't want to do just constant covering, so I'll give myself a break and do something else next. It's always a good idea. That's the advantage of this hobby. There's lots of aspects. I don't enjoy installing radio gear. It's not my favourite thing to do, but the model's not much fun without it. I'm just producing big static models which are no good to man the beast. So you have to do it, but it's just not something I particularly enjoy. Some people hate covering and finishing, and some don't enjoy building wings, but it's not a case of not enjoying it, I just don't enjoy it as much, I suppose. So what I will do is go around the edge again with some full strength dope, just because it makes it easier to get a nice crisp cut on the finish. So all the way around the edge, I'm liberally giving it another coat of full strength dope here. And I think that just helps things along a little bit. And then it's a case of coffee time, leave it, come back and trim it all off. So I'll do that, and then we'll come back and we'll have a look at what it looks like when it's all done. There we have it then, folks. That's the fuselage covered. As fuselage covering goes, that was fairly straightforward. As you can see, it's basically a box structure. But I'm pleased with that finish. It'll get a couple of coats of thin down dope, and that will seal any of the pores. I'll rub along with the iron while it's still warm along the joins, and that'll produce a nice crisp finish. But there you go. All of the covering. Oh, I've just realised I've got this to cover. So I'll crack on while the iron's hot and I'll get this covered. And that's the covering completed on the Fokker D7. Next stage, I'll tidy up and finish off the interior, and then I think I'm going to work on the guns and the dummy engine. Have fun, folks. If you can't get flying and winter's upon us in the Northern Hemisphere, then let's get creative. Take care, folks. Bye now.